Today, we'll discuss about the clinical approach of jaundice. Different clinical scenarios we encounter where jaundice is there. A newborn baby may come with jaundice. A 4 or 5 month old baby again may come with jaundice, not that sick. Baby is active and playful. The eyes are yellow, urine is colored, not colored. Another child, 6, 7 years, coming with fever, yellow discoloration of eyes and urine. 45-year-old person comes with again yellow discoloration of urine and the eyes. No fever situation, progressively increasing jaundice. So these are all clinical situations which we encounter. So we usually equate these clinical scenarios with the commonest of the entities. A newborn baby will consider it must be a physiological jaundice or a blood group related. That's all comes to your mind, because just because it's the commonest of the problems, you won't be going in depth. Maybe 10% of the cases you may be wrong. And the child, older person, you will consider maybe it's a case of malignancy, see a head of pancreas, like that. But how to approach a case in a systematic manner? All of us know jaundice is due to yellow discoloration, due to yellow pigment accumulating in the blood. It can be direct, it can be indirect, or conjugated or unconjugated bilirubin raised in the blood beyond the normal, getting deposit on the areas where the attachment is, the affinity is most. In case of elastic fibers of the sclera, it comes first attachment, you see. And even before that, if it is an unconjugated bilirubin, it comes out in the urine. Irrespective of conjugated, unconjugated, it stains the skin. So, how will you approach different situations? You just see the basic biochemistry. So, bilirubin is produced by the metabolic end product of heme, which again 99.9% comes up with RBCs. Small percentage from the other sources, myoglobin, catalase, peroxidase. It's a very, very negligible source. Practically, it all comes from the RBCs and hemoglobin. Then it's bound to albumin, it reaches the liver cell. Here you need to consider 2 points. One thing, there is an entry point here, and through the cytoplasm it should reach the enzyme UDP glucuronase. So just think about this thing. Before the conjugation step, its only possibility is accumulation of unconjugated bilirubin. And once it's getting conjugated, it goes out from here, this inside the cell into the canaliculi. There is one more step which is not drawn here. Let's see. This is taken from the cell into the canaliculi. Transport is happening. There can be a problem with the transport. That's not due to mechanical block of this pattern. It's molecular transport. So after that, the canaliculi, the smaller one which joins, becomes a larger and enters and comes to the midpoint of duodenum. So you need to consider the entire small things. And after that, there is one more step. There is a re-entry, enterohepatic. The circulation is coming again. After this, it goes into the gut. There is a bacterial breaking, and there is a recycling. Urobilinogen, cercobilinogen goes out. Urobilinogen is again coming in. So that is going through the urine. So that also you need to consider. So why? Because the clinical application of all these biochemistry is there in your step. So stepwise, how can you go? You try to pinpoint where exactly in the biochemistry is if the things went wrong. You pinpoint it to this metabolic pathway. So actually it's just like a neurological, it's a localization into this biochemical cycle. Then the next step comes, your pathological basis. So for the very same localization in this chain, in this metabolic pathway, it can be due to different pathologies. So that's how you approach. So pinpoint where exactly is the problem. Then next question is what went wrong to lead to a pathology here, lead to the problem here. Okay. So what are the steps involved? First step involved is really, am I dealing with a case of jaundice? This may not be jaundice at all. That's the first step. What are the situations? Commonest of the situation is you didn't drink water, dehydrated, starving. So that can lead to one entity. Dehydration and the concentrated urine. It's not at all. It's not a jaundice situation at all. So you just hydrate the patient, urine become clear. That's one. Another entity, even though not common, is carotenemia, where yellow pigments are there, it get deposited because your intake is of this carrot-like or other pigments containing fruits are high. Get deposited on your body, the yellow discoloration of the hands and your skin. The interesting thing is that sclera is white. A few more of the drugs also lead to staining like this. So all these things you need to consider before you proceed in the pathway that it's jaundice. Okay, you rule out that. Next question is, yes, it's jaundice. Because urine is colored, it's not disappearing with adequate hydration. Oh, the eyes are stained. So it cannot be other reason, it must be jaundice. Next step, if it is eye staining, one very important thing, you always check the both eyes together. If not, if you check one eye only, there is another chance of mistake. Bilirubin can be produced locally in certain situations. Examples, you had a fall, sustained an injury here, a hematoma occurred, and the macrophages changes the hemoglobin locally into bilirubin. The blood gradually sinks down, and over the sclera you will get the yellowish pigmentation. Following it, following hemorrhagic conjunctivitis, following eye surgery and all, this is applicable. You get the yellow discoloration due to bilirubin itself, but not in two eyes. It's confined to one eye only. So that doesn't need your workup as a case of jaundice. It's just locally produced bilirubin. So message is, both eyes together you should be examining before you brand it as a jaundice. Here again, one more next step question is, eyes are clear. Can he be having the problem? Yes. Eyes clear, still his bilirubin blood level may be 2.5. So one possibility is the elastic fibers takes time for the attachment. The fast progressing bilirubin situation may take time and you may miss an early jaundice if you depend on eyes only. That also is very common in a case of hepatitis, where you get the urinary discoloration first and the eyes are stained later. The vice versa, the other application is when you recover from a jaundice also. You may get clearance of your or your symptoms are better, your bilirubin blood level comes down, your urine is clear, but eyes takes maybe one more week for it to clear. So these are all situations in clinical scenarios you need to consider, apply rarely in day-to-day practice. The second and most important step in the evaluation is what all specimens you will be looking for before you proceed. So we need to check one, eyes. Next one, always see the urine of the patient. Don't ask the patient is it color. You make it a point to see the urine taken in a clear test tube and verify that. The other specimens which all of us will be asking for the history, no. You see the towel or the other dress materials and the axilla areas where sweat comes. If there is discoloration, it's a very good information, because the urine is colored and the dress material sweat is producing, staining the dress, means one more step, he's having jaundice. Not only that, he's having direct hyperbilirubinemia. So you're one more step ahead. So specimens, always see the towel, dress also, urine also, and last one thing, see the stool. See the stool and verify the macroscopic appearance of the stool. Why? Because the color is important. The normal color means it's very unlikely to be a direct hyperbilirubinemia. There can be bloody stools. All these things are also important when you apply the next step of pathology. So, in this step, you see the specimens, clinical examination of eye, macroscopic appearance of the urine, macroscopic appearance of stool, and the towel and dress materials. These are very important in the clinical evaluation further. Now, you are going to answer, am I dealing with a direct hyperbilirubinemia situation or an indirect hyperbilirubinemia situation? How? See here. If the conjugation happens, it goes out, and direct bilirubin is going into it won't come back. If it is conjugated, it goes out. If after conjugation, any pathology beyond this thing, after conjugation, it is not entering into the canaliculi. There's an enzyme that is blocked, you'll get something called Dubin-Johnson rotor situation. If this is blocked, you will get direct hyperbilirubinemia. This will get regurgitated back to the blood. It's direct bilirubin accumulated in the blood. So it's not only the direct bilirubin here, mechanical obstruction lead to lot of accumulation of lot of things which are excreted. Cholesterol will accumulate, bile salt will accumulate. So that is the hallmark of the canaliculi, large canaliculi, major bile duct up to the sphincter of body. Obsession of everything. Here, obsession of only direct bilirubin. And what about the situation where the pathology is here? The unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, when the conjugation is not happening. So whatever the situations, if the lot of bilirubin is high, where the conjugation mechanism is normal, the conjugation mechanism is overwhelmed by this large supply of the bilirubin. You cannot catch up with this thing. That is the situation where you get or hyperhemolytic situations or a large hematoma where the bilirubin load is too high, but the conjugation mechanism is okay. There is another situation where the amount of bilirubin delivered to the hepatocytes is just normal, whatever is produced daily. But there is two situations where the conjugation is not happening. Either the conjugation step is not happening or the entry here is not happening. What will happen? All unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia happen here also. But the pathology is something wrong with the enzyme. Either the enzyme is immature in a case of newborn, or enzyme is totally abnormal structure in a situation of abnormal enzymes. Another situation is the enzyme is not allowed to work by some other mechanisms like blocking, interfering with the function. So the very same problem can be due to different mechanisms. So first you are differentiating between two situations. Am I dealing with an unconjugated bilirubinemia or am I dealing with a conjugated hyperbilirubinemia? How? Simple. You see the specimens, all specimens. So what are the hallmark of an unconjugated hyperlipidemia? Your urine is clear, acaloric jaundice. Your stool is normal. So jaundice is the urine is clear, stool is normal. Most likely you are dealing with situations on this side. Either large bilirubin lot or a normal bilirubin lot, something wrong here or here. So simple. So what about the other? After conjugation? All the pathologies beyond conjugation lead to urine discoloration. Stool may be white. So in that situation, you are dealing with either pathology starting from the cell to the canaliculi or within the canaliculi, intrahepatic, or after that major bile duct and common bile duct and up to the sphincter of Oddi. The pathology can be cell to the canaliculi, intrahepatic, extrahepatic up to the sphincter of Oddi. So divide like that. Direct hyperlipidemia you divide into 3 again. Cell to the canaliculi, that is Dubin-Johnson-Rotter, it's the rarest of the situation. Then most of the hepatic, something wrong with the intrahepatic canaliculi. And third one is extrahepatic. So all of us know about the biliary canaliculi, the calculi, cholecyst, the cystic malformations of the bile duct called Dockal cyst. Or in an adult, some malignancy occurring at the head of pancreas. Maybe some of the worms can enter into the bile duct, roundworm encroaching and entering into this thing. All these all leads to same clinical phenomena. So your second step is to differentiate, am I dealing with this or that? So suppose I'll take one of these. So you're 50%, you have decided, you have gone through halfway through. So I'm just taking up the first part. I'm dealing with the case of unconjugated hyperlipidemia because urine is clear, eyes are stained. So I said among this group there are two broad possibilities. One thing is large lot of bilirubin, the other is lot of bilirubin is normal, hepatic, conjugation is. So what are the situations? Where will you get the lot of bilirubin? Once there is a destruction. RBC's destruction due to lysis or hematoma, whatever. So what are the clinical signs which will help you to move forward in that direction? Child will be pale. Child, it can be adult also. The pallor is a hallmark of a blood loss, lysis or loss. So pale person. And it may be hematoma or it can be lysis. What is the hallmark? What is the clinical sign which indicates it's a lysis? Spleen. Other evidence of hemolysis like monotic facies, spleen, all the other features of hemolysis. So that's how you proceed. And having a case of jaundice, urine is not stained. Is he pale or not? If he is pale, that must be hematoma or a hemolytic phase. You look for the evidence of that. So what is the other situation? Unconjugated hyperlipidemia, but pallor is not there. It's not due to increased bilirubin lot. It is due to the conjugating mechanism or an entry point problem. So there are certain situations, just physiological or a very mild benign situation. All of you know Gilbert syndrome. So problems with the conjugation, there is a problem with the entry. So Gilbert is one situation where you get repeated episodes of unconjugated hyperlipidemia. Patient won't be sick. It lasts for a few days during stress or a fever or starvation. So you'll get it. Multiple episodes, you won't be affected. You'll be alright after this episode. Family history is there. So simple, very common, 2-3% of our population having Gilbert syndrome. So next thing is something goes wrong with the enzyme. So I said there can be pathological also and physiological also. All of us are aware of the neonatal jaundice physiological. What's happening there? The enzyme is set to mature, and once it matures, it's just move on normal. So immaturity is one situation in the newborn, which is leading to all the unconjugated bilirubin. Again, the child is not pale. Pale is active. Only thing is that it expresses jaundice to varying extent, physiological range only, it moves on, become normalized. The other entity where you get the neonatal period of jaundice is the previous situation where lysis is there, the child will be pale, spleen is there, RH incompatibility, IBO incompatibility. So, newborn can have two situations. One is the entire benign situation where the enzyme is a problem. The other extreme, the enzymes are normal, but the hemolysis is the problem. So, very same age, very same problem, two different pathologies. So, your clinical sign, elicitation of the pallor and the spleen, and history of group, history of family history, all sorts of things in the next step when you link with the pathology. Okay? Now, you take the other side. So, I am not talking about the hemolytic disorders, that's again one more day we will devote for that only. So, about the direct, suppose your urine is yellow, stool is white, stool may or may not be white in all situations. Urine is yellow, eyes are yellow. That means it happened after the conjugation. So, take the first step. What will be the situation? Dubin-Johnson and Rotter. Comparatively benign situation. There may be sporadic situation where very interesting thing. The block here only will lead to accumulation of cholesterol, bile salt and all. Block here will not. So, how to differentiate that? You ask for itching. If there is itching, evidence of bile salt accumulation, that means it's not Dubin-Johnson. It is definitely a block, mechanical block, somewhere beyond the first step. Dubin-Johnson is a situation of a long duration and direct hyperbulimia without much of other evidence of block. You won't get an high alkaline phosphatase, GGT, or a bile salt accumulation, cholesterol accumulation. Just a direct hyperbulimia, prolonged episodic worsening. So, what about the other situation? You need to differentiate between two situations. Is it an intrahepatic? Is it an extrahepatic? So, most of the situations what we know are sort of infections, A hepatitis, B hepatitis, C, D, E, everything we know, infections. You know Wilson, we know autoimmune hepatitis, we know toxic injury, you know lot of other metabolic problems, innumerable parenchymal disorders of the liver with manifestation of the, in an older person, alcoholic hepatitis. All of us know all these pathologies where the parenchymal cellular injury is the cells are swollen, the canaliculi are encroached and you get the direct hyperbulimia. What does the hallmark? In all the situations you will get varying extent of your cellular injury evidence. The transaminase goes high in addition to alkaline phosphatase were due to direct hyperbulimia, GGT elevation. You will get all the synthetic activity of the cells disturbed. There can be a coagulation problem. There can be protein synthesis problem depending upon the duration. So, the evidence of a cellular injury in the functional is much more common in the case of intrahepatic. So, what about the extrahepatic? When the pathology is outside the liver, like stones and the carcinoma head of pancreas or the choledochosis blocking the larger, what are the things which will point to that? Very important thing, the ducts are all lined by the smooth muscles. When there is a block, they will try to bypass the block by the spasms. So, very important point, you are getting a colicky pain means it's an extrahepatic pathology. And what more? Extrahepatic pathology will take some time for the liver injury manifestations. Hepatic function derangement will not be so early, it will be late. So, that's how you differentiate. Colicky pain argues for an extrahepatic and dull achic pain may be there. The other situation, the pain won't be there unless, the other situation means hepatic situation. Pain won't be there unless in the beginning there can be a capsular stretching of hepatitis. Otherwise, a dull ache or heaviness can be felt. But the colicky pain argues always for an extrahepatic. Okay. Now, with this method, you can pinpoint where is the pathology. So, you have covered the first part of the talk. Okay. The next part is what is the pathology? I'll take just one situation. Suppose your answer is that it's an intrahepatic pathology after the conjugation, intrahepatic. That's where you localized your pathology by this mechanism. This can be due to different pathological state. It can be an infection. It can be a metabolic problem. It can be a toxin. It can be due to some of the inherent autoimmune phenomena. So how to differentiate? All the other history points are the things. Suppose the child is having fever, child is having a contact with another person is admitted in the hospital, so that all argues for an infection. There you need to differentiate between leptospira, hepatitis A, B, C, E, D, whatever. The epidemiological situation, history, and you need lab investigation to pinpoint what is the pathology. Okay. Another situation, there is no fever, you don't get any other members affected, but he is on a drug. It's well known to produce. So he was put on ITT for the last 2 weeks. So it's a drug related. Another history, this family history of multiple members with jaundice. Another member admitted with hematemesis. Another member admitted in a lunatic asylum, psychiatric person. So that's all arguing for the another metabolic problems can have a range of manifestation, multiple system affected. Wilson can have, that's very, very important in the history. You should be asking for the manifestations, consider other manifestations. A family member admitted with a neuropsychiatric manifestation may be the only clue for the Wilson, where he is now admitted with jaundice. So if you ask for a family history of jaundice only, you may miss it. So when you construct the pedigree chart, ask for the history, consider the versatile nature of Wilson. Okay. So another situation is you are getting some of the clues of an autoimmune phenomena. So the importance of the history comes for the pathological answer. What is the reason? Okay. The next thing is your general examination. What are you achieving by the general examination? 2 things. More and more clues for answering what is the pathology. Then another thing, what is the stage, what is the severity of the problem? Again. So if the child now is vitally unstable, that answers 2 things. Is having a very severe situation, going for a hepatic failure situation. So hemolytic jaundice very unlikely to go into situation. So hepatic situation is more likely. So vital signs is very important. All the features you have learned about the hepatic failure, you need to apply for that. I won't go in depth about this. And of course you include all the other examination findings, like is there a pallor, is there a hemolytic facies, is there another evidences in the general examination arguing for a hepatic derangement, like edema, like ascites, like Peter hepaticus, like all this flapping tremor, all these general examination findings you apply, that will answer which is the pathology, seconding what extent is it disturbed. So we'll talk about the investigations and other thing in the end of the class. Thank you.